Welcome to day one of our class for parents. The topic for today is how to get your children to behave, and we're going to be using some positive behavior interventions and supports principles. My name is Rainbow Walker. I'm a school counselor from Golden Hills, and I have with me the other two counselors. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Kari Applegate, and I'm the counselor at Palermo Middle School. I want to welcome you to our class for parents. It's great that you're tuning in and look forward to sharing some things with you.
Hi, I'm Dawn Merlo, and I'm the school counselor for Helen Wilcox Elementary School. Happy to be here.
All right. We're so glad that you're tuning in. We were able to provide 6 different sessions, and we started providing these sessions prior to the school closures. We did days 1, 2, and 3 in person with some parents, and then we had the school closures and we had to record, and we thought, why not go back and record days 1, 2, and 3 for those people who didn't get a chance to go to those classes and still wanted to watch them. Now we can offer them to you virtually. And we're really glad that you're here tuning in with us today because we know you have a lot going on, and we're hoping that you can get some valuable information from this. So I wanted to start by just kind of briefly going over what each session is about so that you had an idea. Today, we're going to talk about introducing this idea of behavior and why the behavior is happening, getting us just thinking about our child's behavior and what it is that might be causing the problem behavior that we're seeing. In day 2, we will go over making a positive environment, and this is where we'll be identifying some routines that we need to work on, maybe some routines that we're struggling with in the home, and then coming up with some rules and expectations under those routines so that things are really clear and positive and our child knows what's expected. In day 3, we'll talk about how to reinforce those rules and expectations, and we'll go over the research behind positive reinforcement systems and why they work and what we need to do to make them work. Day 4, what we will do when we respond to the problem behavior. So when the problem behavior does occur, how should we respond in order to address it and hopefully change it to what we would like to see instead. In day 5, we'll go over working with other family members to communicate and cooperate. And specifically, we're going to talk about consistency and the importance of consistency and how we can work on creating a more consistent response to problem behavior. And then lastly, in our last session, we'll go over the importance of self-regulation. We'll talk about some self-regulation strategies and some ways that we can use those regulation strategies to help to regulate our child's behavior as well. So those are the 6 sessions that we'll be covering. In today's session, we'll be going over what behavior is and how we can identify the behavior that we want to change, why that behavior might be happening. And when you see me talk about the ABCs, when we talk about the ABCs, we'll be going over antecedent behavior consequence. So what that means, you'll hear a lot more about it. What happens before the identified behavior and what happens after? What is the consequence or the thing that happens right after the behavior? And then how we can take that information and use it to change and shape behavior into the way we would like to see, the behavior we would like to see instead. So a lot of great information that we'll be covering today. Just to get us started in thinking about behavior, we may be thinking, well, I know what behavior is. I see it all the time. The definition is the way in which someone acts or conducts oneself, especially towards others. When we talk about behavior and why behavior is happening, what I want to encourage you to do is I want you to start looking at behavior as observable and measurable. So, for example, I'm going to give you this example. Instead of saying, my child is being so disrespectful, what does that disrespectful behavior look like? So, when they are being disrespectful, that behavior, what does it look like? Are they calling you names? Are they throwing things and refusing to do what you've asked? Those are the observable behaviors, so that you can actually track how often is this happening? How often are they calling me names and throwing things? That's the observable, measurable behavior. So looking at behavior in a different way, some key principles. Human behavior is actually predictable, and it's changeable, and it's functional. So what that means is when we start to look at behavior as observable and measurable, where we can actually watch it happen, we can say they're doing this, then we can start to predict when it's going to happen, because we can see, oh, every time I ask my child to do this, or every time this happens, then my child calls me a name. So I can start to predict it. When I can start to predict the behavior, that's when I can change it. Because if I change what I'm asking, if I'm changing the situation and when the behavior is happening, then I could possibly change the behavior. And when I say it's functional, it's not good or bad. We want to move away from saying, my child is bad, or that behavior is bad, and more of, it serves a purpose. There's a reason why that behavior is happening. So if we're using the disrespectful behavior, that we are able to observe when the child is calling us a name and throwing something and refusing to do what we've asked, we can then start to say, every time I ask my child to do this, they respond that way. Maybe it's to get something. Maybe there's a reason behind that. So functional really means they're trying to get something out of it. There's a function to it. There's a reason why that behavior is happening. And I'm going to hand it over to Kari, and she's going to explain more about what that function means.
Hello. I just wanted to say one little caveat that we're super glad you guys are all watching. And obviously, if with us just doing the talking and not having discussion, it's not the ideal way that we would like to do our class, but it's the best we can do right now during these times. So we will be doing a lot of talking, and hoping that you are getting out of it really some applied tools and strategies for working with your kids, because we know that that's probably what you're mostly interested in, is things that you can use right away to work with your own kids. So moving on from what Rainbow was talking about, when we ask ourselves, why does behavior occur? I like to think about not just examples in the kids' world, but also examples in the adult world, because that's the world that we all live in, and we can understand these principles in terms of living in the adult world. So behavior occurs, Rainbow was saying it has a function. And if we ask ourselves, why is this happening? Kind of like you're a detective or an investigator. Why is this behavior happening? What is the person trying to get, or what are they trying to avoid? And in almost all circumstances, it's going to be one of those two things. When our kids act a certain way, it's because they want something, or they're trying to get away from something that they find aversive. So some examples of that are getting parents' attention, getting time on the cell phone or laptop, getting to play with their friends, getting a tangible reward like, candy or food or stickers or toys. Escaping things or avoiding things, examples of that are avoiding a chore, avoiding tasks. Sometimes it's avoiding work that's too difficult, or avoiding embarrassment, for example. So we're going to keep looking at this. Think of yourself, like I said, you're kind of a detective figuring out why are these behaviors occurring. This slide shows behavior broken down into 3 domains of things that that kids and adults, all people, may try to obtain or get or avoid or escape. So I'll start with number 2 and 3. So number 2 is sometimes we do behaviors because we're trying to get some kind of social reinforcement. So for example, we might be looking for attention from an adult, or for kids, they might be looking for attention from a peer, because we're social creatures. We want attention. We like it when people, approve of us, think we're funny, think we're likable. And so you'll see this in the adult world and the kids world, that they will do certain behaviors because they're trying to get attention from an adult or peer, or they might be trying to avoid attention from an adult or a peer. Number 3, something tangible or an activity. They might be trying to get something tangible or get a certain activity. So we see this with things like avoiding chores, avoiding homework, trying to obtain or get time on a cell phone or an iPad or a laptop or a video game. Those are activities that kids will really want to do. And sometimes they'll have a lot of behavior to try to get that activity. So we have the social, the tangible, or the activity. And then the last category is number 1, stimulation or sensory. This one's a little bit harder to tease out because it can often be internal to the student or the child. Some people, for example, will do like self-soothing behaviors like tapping or rocking in their chair, rocking back and forth, biting their fingernails, various things that give them some kind of a sensory reinforcer or some kind of stimulation. But that would be the 3rd area that you can see people sometimes trying to get. So they're trying to get some kind of stimulation, or they might be trying to avoid sensory stimulation, like they're avoiding loud noises or bright lights or aversive smells that are in the environment. So those are the 3 main areas we see people trying to obtain or avoid things. So on the next slide, and Dawn and Rainbow, feel free to interrupt me. I'm just plowing forward, but if you have something you want to add, just chime in and interrupt me. The next slide asks the question, why is our children's behavior occurring? Again, this is a little bit repetitive, just breaking it down again, giving you some different examples. Think about when your child does something. It can be a positive something, but most of the time, for the purposes of this class, it's a negative something, because we're trying to figure out how to change that behavior. That's a problem. The behavior is not something that we desire from our kids. So again, to get something, that could be attention from a parent, attention from a peer, that could be a sibling or a friend, attention from a sibling, like I just said. For example, time to talk on the phone, time on a laptop, or avoiding things, work that's too difficult. This could be schoolwork or work that you have around the house for your child to do, work they dislike. None of us like to do things that are, find to be not pleasant, and kids are no different. They might try to avoid boredom or embarrassment or any kind of feeling that is not, that's aversive to them. Okay, so the next slide, I think this is still me. Yes, I just want to give you all a chance to write down a couple things that are specific to your situation with your child or children. I know many of you have more than one child, so you'll have to do a few different lists if you have more than one child. But take the child that's of most concern to you first, and I'd like you to list the 3 specific behaviors that your child is exhibiting in order of concern for you. So just reiterating what Rainbow shared, when you list these behaviors, please list them behavior as something very specific so that it could be seen with your eyes. You can see it and you can measure it. So you would be able to count it. So for example, my kids are older. They're adults, 20 and 22, but say that one of my kids is, since they're living with me right now because of the coronavirus, one of my kids, argues with me, but I'm going to say raises her voice and talks back to me in a disrespectful tone, or raises her voice in a disrespectful tone and talks back to me. So I'm going to make it very specific because I want to be able to count and measure how many times that happens. For the purposes of school-age children, this could be something like hits their sibling, right? Or it could be slamming doors, or it could be yelling. It could be doing the opposite of what the parent asked the child to do. But we want to make it really specific, something that we could count, because we're gonna measure this behavior to see if it improves when we do our behavior plans. So in order of biggest to smallest concern, what are the 3 specific things your child is doing? And then down below, number 2, what is it that you think your child may be obtaining or avoiding by exhibiting behavior? So for school-age children, I'm going to just take the example. I think it's a good one of getting children to sit down and do their schoolwork. If a child refuses to do their work and says, I can't do this, I hate this, I'm not doing this, that would be a specific behavior. My child says, blah, 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 or slams the book shut, or puts their head down on the table. Those are specific behaviors your child would do when you ask them to do homework. And then so for item number 2, what do you think they want or they're trying to avoid by doing that behavior? Those behaviors I just suggested. So for A, you would put avoid doing behavior, and to continue on that they find too difficult or too boring or whatever you think your child's trying to avoid. Work or homework that is too difficult, too boring, that they don't like, something like that. And then you're going to list 3 things in number 2, A, B, and C, that correlate with the behaviors in number 1 for A, B, C. So take some time if you need to and pause us and go ahead and do that for any of your children that you want to, work on doing a behavior plan for. Okay, I'm done with mine. I think,
One more.
okay. My last one, oh yes. Know the ABCs of behavior. ABC stands for antecedent behavior consequence. We like, as this behavior detective that you're gonna be as a parent, just another hat you wear as a parent, we want you to think in these terms, not only in the terms of why is my child doing this, right? What are they trying to get? What are they trying to avoid? But what happens right before they do this behavior and what happens right afterward. That's going to help us figure out our behavior plan. An example might be, I'll keep the same example. We're trying to get our kids at home now to do these packets at work. So say that your child, the behavior is slamming the book shut and putting their head down on the table. And that's a specific description of the behavior, which is also that they're refusing to do their work. What happens right before that? So you might really, think about that and take notice of every time your child does that, what happens right before. So for example, are they being asked to read something? Are they being asked to write something? Is it math? Is it spelling? What happens right before your child slams the book shut and puts their head down on the desk? So what are they being asked to do? You could also put like, what time of the day is it? That would be something about the environment that's related to the antecedent. And then the consequence. What happens right after your child shuts the book, slams the book shut and puts their head down on the table? What happens right after that that either increases or decreases the likelihood you'll see the problem behavior again? So, for example, if the parent comes over and says, maybe engages in an argument with the child, like, Joey, you're supposed to be doing this. Why aren't you doing this? Your teacher wants you to, but you get engaged in an argument. That can actually be reinforcing the student, because if the student is trying to avoid difficult work and the parent starts to argue with the child and the child gets into an argument, the child does what they want, which is they're not doing the work. They're getting into an argument instead. So we want to think of behavior in this way also. A, B, C.
Okay. And so now for the next slide, the ABCs of my child's behavior, we're going to break this down even a little bit more. So on this sheet, it says, please list 3 specific behaviors that your child exhibits in order of concern. I'm going to take a behavior one at a time and go down this sheet. So let's say on number 1A, the behavior is the child's refusing to do homework or a chore. Now, refusing in itself isn't something that's observable. So let's say that refusing to my child looks like the child is yelling or crying. So on number 1, we could still say, refusing to do either homework or a chore. And then you want to make sure and put in there crying or yelling. Then let's go down to number 2A. Please list what happens right before your child exhibits the behavior. So A would be maybe being prompted to do your homework or prompted to do a chore. We want to make sure that it's one thing. I'm giving 2 examples, homework / chore. We won't want it to be just one thing. So for that reason, let's make sure, I'll just say chore, all right? So back to number 1, one behavior is yelling. What did I say? I said yelling or crying, okay? Number 2, what happened right before? I asked my child to do a chore. And then number 3A, please list what happened right after. Well, and this we want to state, what have we been doing so far? So in A, it might be, I've sent my child to the room because he wasn't doing what I asked. And then let me give you one other example. So how about another one? Yelling and kicking. B, on number 1, B, yelling and kicking. Number 2, what happened right before? We were about to go grocery shopping. Number 3, what happened right after? We were not able to go grocery shopping because my child wouldn't quit yelling and kicking, so we went back home. So those are 2 examples. And then I can go on to the next slide. So some ideas for shaping behavior this week. We want to identify when the behavior happens, just like we just talked about, and when it's most likely to happen. So is this going to be likely to happen when they're asked to do a chore, or when we are going to be transitioning? Maybe if it's time to go from, let's say we're co-parenting and the mom and dad live in 2 different houses. It's time to go to dad's house and we were at mom's house. So we're transitioning. Or it's time for us to go pick up sister, at daycare, something like that. That would be, a transition. Maybe that's a time that's likely to happen. Another time often is getting up in the morning when it's time for our daily routine or going to bed. That can be something that's, a common time it's likely to happen. Then we want to change our response. So let's go back to the example of the child started yelling and crying when asked to do a chore. Now, maybe in the past with my child, I have, gotten angry and said, hey, this isn't going to happen. That's not being a good boy. Don't do this. You're going to, we're very angry. What we want to do, we want to change our response to just going back to what is it that we've agreed upon, but also we want to teach our child to change their response. So instead of throwing a fit, that maybe yelling or crying, we would prompt the child, hey, you know what? Why don't you talk to me about it? Use your words. We're going to help mold it with the child that they're going to be communicating with us in a different way. And that goes along with the next line, come up with a way that your child can get what they want in a more acceptable manner. So we want to reinforce a child talking, not yelling or crying. And we will teach them, for example, if you use your words, talk to me about this, and then I will discuss this with you. And maybe the child needs, let's say for a chore, the child needs the task broken down. So maybe the child wants to work in 10-minute increments. Let's say that the chore is cleaning the bedroom. Breaking that down into 10-minute increments, you could do that. You could negotiate with them where they're still doing what it is that you want them to do. But because they've communicated with you in an acceptable manner, you can still help meet their needs. And then, as I said before, you want to ask for things in positive terms versus negative. So instead of asking them to, hey, stop making a mess, you want to ask them, will you pick up your toys? You want to add anything to that?
Rainbow, do you?
Okay.
No, go ahead.
All right, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, wait, I'm sorry, Dawn. I was just gonna say, I like the idea that you were sharing about teaching, like, give them what they need or what they're after in a way that you can deal with, right? That would be acceptable as a parent. So we can all think of things like, well, it would be okay, if they're trying to get out of difficult work, for example, like it's okay to take a break or helping them with the work so it's not so difficult for them, giving substitute behavior or a substitute packet like the modified work if the work they're doing is too difficult. So I think that's a really important one because they're going to keep trying to get what they want. We just want to give them a way to get what they want in a way that works for us too. So I like that. I think that's an important point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I also want to point out when we do these last slides where we talk about like next steps, what we want you to really be thinking about, like what Dawn just went over with you. Give yourself some time to process this information. So even though there's 6 different video sessions, I wouldn't encourage you to watch all 6 one right after the other. I'd really encourage you to watch one and take some time to really think about this, and do some of the activities that we talked about, and actually work on that identified task for at least a couple of days, if not a week, just to see how it goes. And let us know if you have any questions. We have our contact information here, and we really encourage you to email us, give us a phone call, text us. We can even video chat with you if that's a better way to communicate. sometimes it's nicer to be able to see each other's faces. And we want to be able to answer some of your questions. So if you're struggling with the content or you have questions about your specific child's needs and your specific situations, please let us know, and give it some time to really think about the things that we've discussed in the session before you move on to the next session.
So just to reiterate, those phone numbers are, you can text or call. If you like texting better, you can text those numbers, or you can give us a call at those numbers, or email us at those email addresses.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.